Great. So first off, could you just give us a little background about yourself and your own journey with cancer?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been a techie all my life, different tech companies, um, doing different things not relating to the field of cancer or healthcare in general. I was in big B2B companies, and then I was part of startup. And then 6 years ago, I got diagnosed with cancer. And it wasn't my first time with cancer. I actually lost my mom 20 years before to cancer. And, her journey was us basically following whatever the oncologist told us. We didn't ask. We were not actively involved in the decision making. We were just actively involved in the execution, as most patient and caregivers are. Um, and then the first time we actually were faced to take part in the search for option was when we realized everything failed, and our oncologist actually told us that she needs our help to look for clinical trials. And then when we searched for something for my mom, it was too late and we lost her. So when I got my diagnosis, and it's been 20 years after, and I've been a techie and part of this digital transformation where we do everything online, I kind of expected that things will be different. I thought, okay, let me log online. Let me find my Zillow that will tell me what are my treatment options. I'll make a decision and I'll take it from there. And, the notion hit me hard, as they say. So I've realized that since my mom passed away, a lot has changed in terms, there's so much more content online. There's a lot I can read about my disease, about, my prospect, which is not good. There's, communities I can chat with about what their journey looked like. And there's definitely more treatment option than ever before, but there's nothing really actionable out there. There's nothing that tells me, okay, if this is your stage and sub-stage, and if this was your mutation, this is what are truly your options. So in a way, nothing changed, right? I'm still completely and utterly dependent on my oncologist. And whatever he says, whatever he knows, that's what determines the outcome. And it's not a great outlook that you have only one source of information. And also, when you think about it, we put them in an unfair position, because how can they know everything? How can we expect them to remember all the options and in real time match it to a patient? How can they know us well enough? Like, how much can we tolerate pain? And I need something a little bit slower because I still need to work to provide for the family. And there's so many considerations. So that's kind of puzzled me. And let's be honest, it really frustrated me throughout my journey. My journey ended up me participating in 3 different clinical trials that basically helped me beat the odds. So I did 3 clinical trials, 4 approved drugs, and 6 surgeries. But there I am 6 years later, and I've been NED for the past 3 years. And the first thing I did is I got the first PET scan that told me that I've been NED, no visible diseases. I basically decided that I'm building this tool. So if I put meaning into it. So I think cancer patient who've gone through this experience want to put some meaning into it. You can't just go back to your life and treat it as if nothing happened. And for me, it was like, let's use my background in technology, because technology can definitely assist, and put it into good use and build this platform that will help patient and even oncologists identify and get a quick match to treatment option. Hence TrialJectory.
So with that, could you explain fully what TrialJectory is and what it offers?
Yeah, absolutely. So TrialJectory was built with this notion of becoming the TripAdvisor or the Zillow for cancer patient. We want a patient to come in wherever he is in his journey, just got diagnosed, just learned that his treatment failed, has a recurrence, and be able in a matter of minutes to see all the optional treatment options, from clinical trials that are right now the most advanced treatment option and offer the best outcome for patient, to the approved drugs. And have a one place that he can see everything that is right for him. So not just a list, but actually based on all his medical profile, do the matching the same way our oncologist does. For that purposes, we develop an artificial solution engine. So artificial solution sounds like a big word, but what it enables to do is run through a large set of data. So we connected it to the FDA database, and we can run through all different treatment protocol and extract from it the different attributes or medical attributes of a patient that is fitting those trials. The second part of it, from that we develop a dynamic questionnaire. So we let a patient come in and tell us about his disease, diagnosis, again, mutation, treatment history and outcome, overall health. And as you go through those questions, we're already comparing at the back end to the different treatment option. So at the end of this, he's actually presented with all the clinical trials that he fits the eligibility criteria. And we let him also see other patients with the same kind of profile as him, what was their journey look like. So you can get all the different treatment options, but also the outcome. So how many patients in my stage, subtype, and mutation received Keytruda, and how many of them it worked, how many of them had a disease progression, or whatever it is. So you can really see your different treatment option. So that's the first part of what we do. The second part is we realize that even if we'll bring them the right, if we'll see the right clinical trials for you, you still want to better understand them, right? And you want to understand them in the way we understand it, which is not the medical language or the research language. So our machine actually curated for a language that we know. So it'll tell you it's a combination of immunotherapy, PD-L1 inhibitor with chemotherapy. And it will tell you what type of treatment it is, immunotherapy, chemo, combo, targeted, what is the target goals of the treatment, and how it's been administered, where is it located, so where is the site, is it has a placebo, what's the phase if it's a trial. So you get a lot of all the input to the information to make you feel comfortable. Then we allow it to share it with your oncologist. So the idea is the machine will never make decision for you, right? We just want to bring you the right information. Now you can go ahead and send it to your oncologist or bring it with you to the meeting and have a discussion with him, partner with him, discuss your different alternative in order to make the right decision for you. We also have our own team of clinical trial advisors that basically are available to, again, better understand. So we don't give the medical advice, but if you want to better understand, you want to learn more, we help you do it. We help connect you to the pharma. So that's the first part of what we do from the patient point of view. And the service is completely free for patient, obviously. I mean, it's not obvious, but for me, it's obvious because the whole idea is remove barriers for treatment. So that's TrialJectory from the patient perspective. And then for the pharma, what we do is we do two things. If you think we remove the barriers between the pharma and the patient. So on the one hand, we bring to the patient the relevant treatment option, the relevant clinical trials. For the pharma side, we bring them the voice and the insight of the patient. So not only we help them identify the right patient for their trials, we also bring the insight because pharma today doesn't really know a lot about their potential patients. So we bring them insight in terms of how many patients fit their eligibility criteria and how many didn't, and based which criteria. So they can better see if they put a criteria like they wanted treatment naive, a recurrence, stage 4, and ECOG 1, let's say. So maybe it all doesn't tie together. Maybe ECOG 1 is the one that's throwing majority of the patient out. And if you actually change it to ECOG 2 and below, you'll get more potential patient. Maybe you should consider having it not as line 1 or as line 2. We basically show them what they don't see today. How's the whole pre-screening look like? What's impacting the most of the patient population in terms of their eligibility criteria? And then also where those patients are. So in relatively to the site, where is the gap in terms of location? That's one side. The other side is also the decision-making of a patient. So patient could be a match and maybe he was offered a trial and he declined. Why did he decline? Maybe the trial required free-time blood withdrawals and that's something that scares patients. Maybe there's not enough testing and follow-up and that scares some patient. Maybe the doctor didn't feel it was right for a patient because even though they were looking for BRCA mutation, they didn't offer targeted therapy for that mutation. So all this insight of the decision-making, we bring back to the pharma. So they can create more location if the issue is location of site. They can create more information around the different aspects that are barriers for patients so patients will better understand. And the more they understand, probably the more willing they are to accommodate. But if they don't understand the logic and the reason behind it, then obviously they'll be more reluctant to participate. So that's what we do in terms of pharma.
So for providers, how would you essentially, if you were pitching this to them, explain why this sort of program is so important and so effective?
I think because the bottom line is when you look at the 85% of the cancer patients are being treated in the community setting, not in the research institution. And they're not being offered all of the latest, most advanced treatment option, definitely not clinical trials. And we see it at the outcome. You know, less than 3% end up participating. And when you look at also the demographic, it does not represent real world demographic. If we want to make a significant change, if we want to really remove those barriers for patients, we have to bring smarter tools and bring it to the patient. We cannot expect this problem just to be resolved by itself. And we cannot expect the community oncologist to resolve it just by us telling them you need to look at clinical trials, you need to look at the latest drugs approval. We need to help them, and we need to overcome this. And I think we overcome it by two ways. A, we don't put all the loads on the community oncologists because they're overloaded as it is. The ever-growing community of cancer patients, the ever-growing demand from them. We cannot leave them by themselves. We need to use the patient as a partner. And patients are out there and they're actively looking for information. And they are online. So the problem is they come with Google with a lot of nonsense of things that are not relevant because it's not the right match for them. So if we will use their time that they're spending online, and especially now with the COVID-19, the time is also anyway limited, the face-to-face time. So from the safety of the house, we let them find the right option to them. We give them actionable insight, then we can drive this industry forward. We need tools that will remove barriers. The barriers are the volume of the treatment. The barriers are eligibility criteria. The barriers are the medical language and journal. And we can do all of that using an AI. And in a sense, in a matter of 5 minutes, we removed all the barriers and create complete transparency. So a patient sitting in Idaho can actually see a trial that is taking place maybe in Memorial, something he will never have been exposed to before, or even something that is closer to home. It doesn't matter, the geographic location doesn't matter anymore. What matters is the patient, and what matters is the patient having options.
So as this TrialJectory continues to grow, what enhancements do you foresee for the program moving forward?
So I think the majority of what we're focused, so there's two things we want to do. A, we're training the machine indication by indication. So right now we cover 50% of the patient population and we have over 10 indications. We want to cover them all. We want to be able to also offer it for pediatric cancer. So that in terms of reach, so we can really impact and help every cancer patient. The other thing is we want to give them more and more information around the treatment options. So right now we're showing them all the relevant trials and all the relevant approved drugs based on other patient journey. We're now training the machine to actually be able to read studies and published results. So I can actually really show you what best for you. Over time with the data that we accumulated, maybe do some predictive and show you, success that different patient had with different treatment. As additional data point, it doesn't mean that it predicts, it doesn't mean you have to do it. But I think the more we use, the more reach we get, the more data point we collect, both from the published studies and from the real world data that we bring, the better the quality of the decision-making done by the patient and their oncologist, of course.
So speaking from experience, what would be your greatest piece of advice for someone who's just received a diagnosis of cancer?
It's a good question. I think, first of all, as scary as it is, as overwhelming as it is, you cannot outsource your journey. And, the easiest thing is basically to say, I've got this oncologist, I'll do whatever he says. Unfortunately, you cannot do it. It is your life. It's the most important journey of your life. Would you imagine going, when you want to buy a house, go to a real estate agent and tell them, find me the house, let me know just when I need to sign. No need for showing, no need to question, right? It sounds ridiculous. We'll never do something like that. So how come in the journey for our life, you outsource the responsibility for one individual? You have to question, you have to ask, you have to investigate. And you have to find the right route for you. Unfortunately, cancer is a smart, unpredictable disease. It never behaved the way we want to do. I remember when my mom got diagnosed, her prognosis was wonderful. Her doctor told us 80% of the patient within a year get completely better. she didn't make it. We lost her 8 months after diagnosis. So the 80%, whether it's 80 or in my case, it was 40% to actually get better, neither of those matter. Each one is different. So you're different and your preference is different. Your tolerance for pain is different. You have to design your own journey, your own path. And in order to do that, you have to take responsibility. And if it's too much and overwhelming, then have a caregiver, not someone external to you, but your partner, your brother, that you opt and you let him do the research for you, you let him question, and you let him find the right answer that are right for you. I think as patients, we become voiceless. As articulated I might sound right now, and I am, and I'm very forthcoming and strong-minded. A lot of the time when I sat in front of my oncologist, I lost my voice. I couldn't ask for the questions. I was afraid to sound stupid. Sometimes I was afraid to hear the answers. We cannot do it. So plan in advance, write the question, be with someone. You have to, if you want to win it. And you have to win it. There's no option, right? There is no other option.
So on the flip side, if you could give one piece of advice to cancer treatment providers, what would it be?
For the pharmaceutical company, I would say you have to also include, the same way I asked the patient to participate in the discussion, they have to include patient in a real way. I think we hear a lot of them saying now, patient is consumer, patient is partner. We hear a lot of the patient engagement become a real buzzword, but they need to move beyond the buzzword. Unless they truly start looking at patient data, I don't expect them to necessarily to talk to patient, but I do expect them to look at the data and get really involved and have the patient in mind in the decision-making, then none of it, they will not be able to move forward. You cannot just look at the data provided to you by the site. You cannot just look at the raw data that does not involve true real-world patient insight. And you cannot continue excluding patient from the dialogue. So in the materials you're developing, in the communication you're writing, in your design of drugs, have the patient in mind, understand what is his profile. Don't build a unicorn patient, understand what the real patient looks like. When you are writing explanation or communication around treatment, don't write it in a language that a patient cannot understand. Don't expect always that there will be a translator for him. Understand that he should be in charge. And the more empowered he is, by the way, the better he is as a patient, the more committed he is, the more responsible it is, and the more you will get back the insight. I'll give you a small example. In one of the trials that I've been in, I reported of a side effect. And every time I reported it, I kind of got brushed off and said, no, it's probably from something else. It's not in our listed side effect to look out for. And I kept complaining about it and I got nothing. And then in one of the communities group that I was in, I asked other patients if they're, or on the same kind of trials, if they had it. And patients start talking, and I've realized that it's not me and I'm not crazy. A lot of patients started reporting it. And I pushed back to the oncologist and said, you need to look at it. There's something here. And they just closed the publication. They brushed me off. 2 years later, when I saw actually the drugs being released, there's been a lot of discussion about side effects that have not been reported. And this is not to say it wasn't a good drug. It's not to say anything, but you have to listen to the patient.
Absolutely. Well, that's all I have for you. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you think is worth mentioning?
No, I think what we need to acknowledge that, that we need to do right by patients. So we shouldn't sell them. And there's a lot of, advertising. I'm being targeted nonstop with advertising for specific clinical trials or drug. Don't put the patient in that position. One of the things that are extremely important for us is do right by the patient first. So we give them all their options. We let them see all their options. We let them be put in the driver's seat in order for them to drive the right decision, because I think then the entire industry will benefit from.